Hey everybody, Josh Ronquist here for Heavy Debriefings, and we have finally gotten to the new millennium, if you're one of those people who doesn't believe the year 2000 counts. It is the top 10 albums of 2001, in my humblest of humble opinions. Let's begin. Coming in at number 10 is Sonata Arctica with Silence, and this is easily my favorite Sonata Arctica album. It has everything that I'm looking for. The super fast, speedy power metal that we all know and love, the very, very cheesy ballads, the mid-tempo stuff that just makes you feel it right there, and everything in between. And in 2001, it was kind of a staple to kind of make music like this, and I'm so glad that it was because it worked out so very well. And you're not gonna be seeing Sonata Arctica potentially any more in this series for reasons, and I think you know what those reasons are, but I know Silence is the pinnacle, at least to me, of the best of Sonata Arctica, and one of the best power metal albums ever made. Coming in at number 9 is Paradise Lost with Believe in Nothing, and unfortunately with the release of this album, it did have some rough production, but a few years ago they actually did a remix and remaster of this album that sounds so much better, and these songs are so much better to listen to now. I think the songs are actually garnering a little bit more attention because of that remix and remaster. I still love the original version. I love the new version so much more because the songs are so much clearer, the production is so much better, and the songs have the life that they were supposed to have. This is also the last album of Paradise Lost's more alternative metal kind of sound. After this, they started getting much heavier, and that's not a bad thing whatsoever. I love the Death Doom era, I love the gothic metal era, I love the heavy rock, heavy metal era of Paradise Lost. But the alternative industrial era is something that's very near and dear to me, and I'm so glad that that second era lives on through the band Host, which of course features Nick and Gregor. And you know, a new Paradise Lost album did get announced for next year, and that's got me very excited. But until then, why don't you check out the second era of Paradise Lost, whether it's the band Host, the album Host, or this one in particular, Believe in Nothing. Coming in at number 8 is a little bit cheating, but a little bit not at the same time, and I will explain. It's Modeling of the Well with Leaving Your Body Map and Bath. They are two albums released on the same day. They're companion albums, they're sister albums, however you want to think about it. But to me, they're albums that are meant to be listened to simultaneously. And it's weird how this comes together because you can listen to Leaving Your Body Map, then Bath. You can also listen to Bath and Leaving Your Body Map, and it still makes equally as much sense. It's also weird to say that because it almost makes no sense at the same time. See, the thing with Modeling of the Well is this was their last album before their first breakup, and it is a band that was not afraid of creating anything. They wrote every single style of metal that you could think of at the time for 2001, and it all worked. And it was all strange. It was all very avant-garde, very experimental, but you got your prog, you got your death, you got your doom, you got your black, you got your jazz, you got your pop, you got everything combined in this band. And either you love stuff like this, or you loathe/hate stuff like this. For me, I love it. I love everything that Toby Driver has pretty much done. I love KO Dot with a passion, and I can guarantee you're going to be seeing some KO Dots on these lists at some point. I can't say when, but you will be seeing some KO Dot in the future. But with Modeling of the Well, I couldn't separate these two albums, and I didn't want to make them 8 and 7 because there's some very important albums coming up to me on this release, and I think it was important to kind of have this be one full experience. And I highly recommend you to do the same if you are adventurous enough. If you like avant-garde metal, if you like experimental metal, if you're really the kind of person who says that you like all kinds of music, I defy you to check out Modeling of the Well and tell me what you think about it. Coming in at number 7 is probably my favorite black metal album of all time, when I really truly think about it. And I'm talking more the straight up second wave, non-dog crap production era, non-black metal mixed with everything else, but more of the closest to straight up black metal there can be. Emperor with Prometheus, the discipline of fire and demise. And yes, it is symphonic black metal. Yes, there is elements of progressive metal, but I don't think anyone in the right mind would consider the fourth and final album from Emperor to be anything other than black metal. And it is truly that. I mean, yes, they're experimenting more with the orchestration, symphonics, progressive things that you wouldn't normally hear in black metal, but it is still a straight up black metal album, and I love it for that reason. This is the final album from Emperor, as I mentioned already, and this was just a couple years before Isan decided to go solo and really become one of the most extravagant and expressionist metal artists out there. And you can hear hints of that style throughout Prometheus. One of my favorite black metal songs of all time in a Wordless Chamber is on this album, and I think it's a fair representation of what the album is about. There's so many great highs and lows in the black metal sound. The string accompaniment and the orchestration is just pure perfection on here. It really is just one of the greatest, closest to straight up black metal albums there has ever been. And I know other people will say differently, and a lot of people consider this to be the worst Emperor album. To that I say, you're wrong, and it's okay to be wrong. Give this album another spin, and understand why black metal needs to be more than just black metal. Coming in at number 6 is arguably one of my favorite power metal albums of all time. It is Camelot with Karma, and this is just a perfect album from start to finish. Every song on this album is pure, perfect power metal. Although there is one shining example of what I consider to be the perfect power metal song. If someone was to ask me what is power metal, I would show them this song, and it is, of course, Forever. It may be their best known song, it might be their biggest song, and if you are an old fan, it is one of the diehard favorite songs. But there is a reason for that. It is just that good. And it goes with the rest of the album. Roy Khan and company just wrote a magnificent album and released it in 2001 at a time that we really needed some metal like this. And it still holds up all these years later. And I'm so happy to see that they still play songs off this album. Of course they pretty much have to. I mean, Forever has to be a part of the set list. It just has to. But I just love this album from start to finish. I love it to death. And if you want some of the best power metal ever written, check out this album. Coming in at number 5 is one of my favorite first wave metalcore, which is what I consider the original sound of metalcore before the later 2000s came in with bands like Shadows Fall, Killswitch Engage, Lamb of God, so on and so forth. It is Converge with the concept album Jane Doe, and it is the perfect dissolving relationship album. Right from the beginning in Concubine, you see how everything is slowly falling apart, and when you get to that epic 11-minute title track, if you're really paying attention to the lyrics, and honestly, I can understand if you have to read the lyrics to understand what's going on, because I know the vocals can be quite harsh when it comes to Converge, you understand everything that's going on, and it is just a heartbreaking, tear-jerking experience. Everything about this album is fantastic, from the production to the songwriting to the proficiency to the musicianship, and it's a reason why it's regarded as one of the greatest metalcore albums, and honestly one of the greatest metal albums ever. Of course, it has a lot of hardcore flair to it, and it's one of the first albums that really had that post-hardcore feel behind it, because there's a lot of great emotional moments going on throughout this album, and of course, post-hardcore would become its own thing pretty much right after this album. This album is so influential to so many people, especially if you love that chaotic sound, and again, like, the title track is one of my favorite songs. And it's just so great to see that even when this album came out in 2001, it still holds up like it just came out last week. It really is that good of an album, and if you want something a little bit more extreme in your metalcore sound, or if you just want to check out what first wave metalcore was really, truly all about, you have to check out the 4th album from Converge, known as Jane Doe. Coming in at number 4 is my former favorite album of all time, and it is quite shocking to see that over the years it went from being my favorite album of all time, a very misunderstood album from a lot of people, but an album nonetheless that meant so near and dear to me and helped me through a lot of years. Devin Townsend's Terria. The concept album based about Canada, and it's got all the progressive metal flavorings on here. Some of the best songs that he's ever written are on this album. It's also one of the strangest Devin Townsend albums ever made, and it was my favorite album of all time for many, many years. And over the years, it just kind of fell down more and more as my taste changed. My taste kind of went different, but this album I still have a huge appreciation for. It hits you in the heart, it hits you in the soul, it hits you in the genitals if you like it that way. There's so much to appreciate about this album, and I would not at all say you should do what I did and make this one of your first 2 Devin Townsend albums. I bought this alongside of Accelerated Evolution. I just pretty much kept listening to Terria all the time. I mean, I love Accelerated Evolution, and trust me, you're gonna see that. And I gravitate towards that more now than I did before. For a certain time, for a long period of time, Terria was that album for me. I love the strangeness, I love the progginess, I love the songwriting, I love where you don't know where the songs are gonna go, but it was all pure heavy-devy. And if you are familiar with Devin Townsend, like if you've checked out some of his albums, maybe you've checked out Strap Young Lad, whatever the case is, I would still wait to check out Terria, because it is a very strange album. It's a very avant-garde kind of style, and it's not going to be for everybody. Although, if you are that adventurous, maybe you should check it out. I mean, it was my favorite album for a long time, and I didn't know what to expect going in. So, maybe that could be the same for you. Who knows? Coming in at number 3 is a band and an album that I'm sure is going to make a lot of people upset that it's not higher. Even though I think the top 3, considering all the music that I listen to, is quite nice. It's Opeth's Blackwater Park. And a lot of people consider this to be the definitive progressive death metal album. And they're not wrong for thinking so. I also think they're the kind of people who have never checked out Edge of Sanity. But all of that said, this is a masterpiece of an album. From start to finish, this album is pure, unadulterated perfection. Michael Agerfeldt and company created arguably their best work on this album, and with Steven Wilson being able to contribute to the production and some backing vocals occasionally, it just made for an album experience that we never got again, and we probably never will again. The song Bleak is one of my favorite progressive death metal songs, and arguably just one of my favorite songs of all time. Everything from the title track, the funeral portrait, Dirge for November, there's so much to love about this album. And if you are a progressive death metal fan, you know why. And if you've never checked out Opeth before, if you've never checked out progressive death metal before, this is one of the albums that you should check out to see if it's for you. I still say Purgatory Afterglow or Crimson or even Crimson 2 from Edge of Sanity might be better choices, but arguably the biggest of them all is Opeth's Blackwater Park, and it's understandable as to why. Coming in at number 2 is Catatonia with my favorite Catatonia album, Last Fair Deal Gone Down. And pretty much since the pandemic, Catatonia has skyrocketed to be one of my favorite bands. I've always loved them. I saw them a couple times live. Eternally grateful for that because I know they don't do as much touring as they used to. But for some reason, and I cannot understand why, but I gravitated towards Last Fair Deal Gone Down more than any other album. Last Fair Deal Gone Down is one of those albums that I feel like kind of shows off my personality. Although I had nothing to do with this album, obviously. But it has so much of what I love. It has the gothic metal sound, it has alternative metal, it has progressive metal, a little bit of electronica, a bit of doom, a little bit of pop. It has a little bit of everything to me, and it just works so perfectly. It's one of the most experimental Catatonia albums. I know some people would say City Burials is the most experimental. I would argue against that because they had a definitive style on that album. It wasn't them being experimental. They had a finite idea of what they were going for. Whereas Last Fair Deal Gone Down, along with the new album Sky Void of Stars, they're both albums that hit so many different territories. They do everything but the Death Doom era of the band, and a little bit more that you don't see on other albums. And I love both of them for that reason. And if you remember my Backwards Marathon from back when the album came out back in January, I honestly think I might give it an S now. It really is that good. But it is still the silver to Last Fair Deal Gone Down. And if you want a variety pack of what Catatonia is all about, I highly recommend checking out this album. And if you like something from a particular side or a particular song off this album, there is a Catatonia album for you right lined up. And coming in at number 1, some people will say this is a cop-out because it is just one song. To me, it is a full album, the perfect 60 minutes, and my favorite album of all time. Green Carnation, Light of Day, Day of Darkness. And back in 2016, I was ever so thankful to be able to check this out at Prog Power USA down in Atlanta. Even more than Devin Townsend with Annika van Giersbergen. I was looking forward to this set more. This was the reason I bought a ticket. I wanted to see this more than anything, and I'm so thankful I got to do so. This album is everything to me, and it's a very tragic and also uplifting album when you look at it lyrically. Musically, it has almost every single style of metal ever created up to that point, and variations on styles that would come up later. But it's primarily focused on progressive, gothic, and doom metal. Of course, there's a little bit of electronica in there, there's a lot of acoustic going on, there's some choirs and chanting that goes on. In the middle of the album, there is some vocal performances that I've never seen recreated. In the live version, it was just done on an acoustic guitar, a little bit of an acoustic solo that I think works just as good, but, you know, it's a little different for everybody. I can see some people saying the band went up their own ass on this album with how pretentious it is. I guess for me, I love the pretentiousness. If writing an hour-long song as an album is pretentious, then I'm pretentious as hell as well. I love this album to death, and I think all 60 minutes and 6 seconds are needed. It is the kind of album that makes me wonder why people complain so much about an album being so long if it's like 50, 60, 70 minutes long, when my favorite album and my favorite song is an hour long. Maybe I'm the problem. I just thought about that. But seriously, this is the crowning achievement of Green Carnation, and I just love what they do here. Green Carnation is deeply, deeply underappreciated, and I love anytime I can show them off, be it an interview, be it when they put out my favorite album, which is their latest. A couple years ago when they released it, it was my number 1 album of the year. It still will be. And of course, they released my favorite song and my favorite album of all time, Light of Day, Day of Darkness. And if you have an hour to spare, I implore you to check this one out. It is well worth your time, and there's bound to be at least some part of this song, some part of this album you will enjoy. And there you go, folks, my top 10 albums of 2001, or maybe it's the top 11 albums of 2001, or maybe it really is the top 10 of 2001 because 1 doesn't technically count. It's my list, so suck it. But if you enjoyed this list, if you found something new, if you didn't like this list, or if you just want to tell me how wrong I am for having my own personal opinion, let me know down below. And why don't you let me know what are your favorite albums of 2001. And of course, like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that great stuff. And until my next top 10 video, review, interview, backwards marathon, or any other kind of video I put up here on the Heavy Debriefings YouTube channel. This is Josh Runquist saying, see ya.